Well, welcome. I'm Lucy and I'm here from Inclusive Change, and I'm going to take you through the next 25, 30 minutes or so, a session all about recruitment and neurodiversity. Um, if you haven't joined us live on the call, I know that there's quite a few of you that have signed but are not here today. Welcome, because hopefully you're watching me on a recording. I do like to do a recording, so you'll get that into your inbox later this afternoon. So for those of you that are here today, we're going to be talking about recruitment and neurodiversity. I kind of call this from awareness to action, because, hey, we've had lots of awareness over the past few years, but actually now we need to start looking at taking action in regards to neurodiversity in the workplace. And this session is going to talk specifically about action around recruitment. So quick one from myself. Aha, everybody's here now. A quick one from myself. I always start with a phrase, which is change begins with passionate people who have a vision. I have a vision. It's the reason why I set up Inclusive Change. Now, if you were expecting Becca today, Becca's not with us today. I'm here. I'm the founder of Inclusive Change, and I had a vision 2018 that I would change employment outcomes for autistic, and then it kind of spiraled into neurodivergent adults in the workplace. That's where it all started from, and here's where I am today. If you want to find out more about me, I have a business card on there, or go and find me on LinkedIn. You'll find me behind the scenes. Few ground rules. I'm going to talk about neurodiversity. It's a massive topic. I can't cover everything in just a 30-minute session, but I will focus in on ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia. This is a space where I hope people will feel safe and respected when exploring the topics. And I will ask you to put some stuff in the chat later on. Any questions, share thoughts, seek clarification, correct me if you think, no, hang on a minute, Luce, I don't like that. I'm not quite sure that what you've said is aligning with me here. Pop it in the chat. I get it. It's okay. All right. And we've got a few more bits. The session's 30 minutes, might go over by about 5 minutes just because we kind of started a little bit late with everybody joining, but we will also have 15-minute Q&A. So I will finish by 12:45, but generally I might go a little bit over with a bit of it. Feel free to fidget, move around, doodle, stim, do whatever you need to do. You want to make the slides bigger? Hang on a minute. What are you seeing? Are you seeing the bit behind the scenes? All right, then, let's get back into the role, okay? I'm going to get back into the flow, okay? Right. So 30-minute session, might have a few more minutes just because I had a little bit of a technical issue, and I didn't have IT to turn it off and turn it on again. Feel free to fidget, move around, doodle, stim, do whatever you need to do. Cameras on or off. It is totally okay by me. I can't even see you. I'm not looking at you. I'm not even looking at myself. It's okay to be quiet and not interact, but I do love a bit of interaction. So I'm hoping that you will put some questions in the chat and engage as we go along. And there's no break. We ain't got time for that. You will get a copy of the recording. Okay. So neurodiversity and recruitment. Okay. Recruitment for me is a massive part of bringing somebody on and actually setting the tone for who we are and how we work in an organization. We're going to cover four areas. Well, I say four, three areas. Why neurodiversity matters in recruitment and why it's important to talk about it, the common barriers that we may experience in recruitment, and some reasonable adjustments and some really short strategies that might be able to help us during the recruitment life cycle. And I will talk a bit about access to work. So if you haven't heard about access to work yet, I will cover that right at the end. All right. So really, being a hiring manager, being somebody who managed recruitment in organizations that I have worked in, recruitment is a process, but it's also about building relationships with people. In order to build a team, you need to understand us as individuals, as a whole person. And as we're complex human beings and we're driven by different goals, interests, and desires, it's likely that that's going to show up in any recruitment process. So let's move forward. I've mentioned already, we are moving from awareness here into what I call installation. Yep. We've downloaded the manual, we've looked at awareness, and now we're going to talk about some of the real specific things we can do around recruitment. So, why do we need to talk about recruitment right now? I'd love to hear your thoughts about why this topic is important right now. And I can give you some clues because they're on the screen. But why is it that you're on this call today? Pop it in the chat, let us know, and let me know why you are on the call today and what you'd like to get out of this call. So, some of the reasons I think we need to talk about this, and I'm more than happy for you to come up with more, are talent shortages. Do we have a talent shortage, or could we also look at this a different way? Do we have a recruitment problem? Is there something about the way in which we have structured recruitment in our organizations? And I'll put my hands up that I have been part of this too, and I probably still am, that our system, our processes, and the way in which we structure our recruitment processes, maybe they're knocking talent out. Maybe they're keeping them away from us. So maybe we need to look at it. We've also got things there like burnout. Okay. There is a lot we could talk about burnout. And in fact, I could probably do a whole 3-hour session about burnout. Back last year, there was a Keep Britain Working and ADHD task force, 2 reports that came out, Keep Britain Working and ADHD. The ADHD task force. I can't get my words out, can I? They both came out the tail end of last year. And one of the things that came out of that were a large and growing number of working age adults are out of work because of health conditions or disabilities. Some of those will be neurodivergence. Some of that will be, oh, bear with me because I can't see. There we are. Some of that will be ill health. Some of that will be neurodiversity. And 1 in 5 people are out of work because of health. That's a massive thing around the cost for us as employers, the cost for us in the economy. There's a whole load of reasons we need to talk about this. I'd also say as well that Gen Z, and I'm going to move my slide forward because I have my lovely Gen Z slide coming up. Gen Z are a generation of young people, kind of between the ages of 15 and 28, okay? Our Gen Z population and our Gen Z young people coming into the world of work, they expect things to be quite different. And there are surveys that came out in 2023, so 3 years ago, that tell us that 53% of Gen Z identify or consider themselves to be neurodivergent. 53% people. That means if we're not thinking about our recruitment processes and looking at them through a lens of neurodivergence or neurodiversity, you use the word that you're comfortable with. If we're not looking at it through that lens, then we're probably missing out on talent. Therefore, I go back to, do we have a talent shortage or do we have a recruitment problem? And we work at Inclusive Change with a lot of young people who are not in employment, education and training, NEETs. We love an acronym, don't we? And that's exactly what we're seeing. They're not getting the support. They're not seeing how they fit into organizations because their brains work differently, or they think and process the world in a different way. Any questions at this point, just pop them in the chat and I'm just going to come up and have a look. Improve attrition, culture, company reputation. Representing your community is really important to lots of organizations. Our customers, our clients, we want to represent them when we serve them and work for them. And I kind of come aligned to servant leadership in terms of we're there to serve people and we're there to support communities, particularly at Inclusive Change. If we don't represent our communities, then are we missing out? So let's have a quick look at that life cycle of recruitment. Now, I can talk about life cycles of employment for a very long time, but we're going to take a little snapshot here of recruitment. And we've got kind of 6 stages here of the preparing, the sourcing and finding talents, the screening job applications, the selecting, the hiring, and the onboarding. At each step along the way, we are likely to come across barriers That will mean that neurodivergent talent do not proceed and don't get through each of those stages. We can think, for instance, around the preparing our recruitment plan and our job description. Have you looked recently at your job descriptions and seen whether or not there is language in those job descriptions that may very well deter somebody who's neurodivergent in applying? So somebody who's ADHD may see organizational skills or great organizational skills, and they may very well say, no, I'm not going to do that. Somebody who's autistic might see great communication skills or flexibility, and they might see that and go, well, that's not me, I can't do it. And so you may be missing out on great talent because they see these big kind of generic language that mean I can't go for that job because that's not me, and there's no point. Then you've got things like actually making the application. So somebody who's ADHD, for instance, may just completely put off making an application because the steps to do it are way too many, and they've given up past step 2. Now, that might be a challenge because actually you need that person to be organized and be tenacious in that job role. So I get it. That's part of that screening process. However, you may want to think about your processes and think, okay, can we look at this through a different lens? Somebody who's dyslexic, for instance, may find it difficult and may find it hard to process information in an application form. And therefore, is there another route by which they can apply? All of those things are things that you might want to think about. But at each stage, you're going to find that there are barriers for people applying who are neurodivergent. In things like hiring, choosing the right candidate, is your hiring panel, do they have training around neurodivergence? So if somebody came in and didn't give you a firm handshake and direct eye contact, are they going to be marked down because they didn't fulfill the criteria of that in the interview process, in the assessment process? I'll give you an example today, actually. A few months ago, my daughter, she's coming up to 20. She's autistic, and we talk a lot about her experiences at home and share some of those things in these kind of calls because they're personal, but they're lived experience, and I have permission to share. She applied for a job in a high street retailer, a supermarket, just a small one, like an express one. And she had to go through an online screening process. And it did say, if some people find these really difficult, if you'd like an alternative way, please get in touch with us. She said, I don't want to do that. I just want to be assessed like other people. She went through the test. It was kind of a personality test, like one of those psychometric tests. And it was a situational judgment test, actually. And being autistic, those questions and the answers, she didn't have enough information in order to make what she would call an informed decision about it. So she did the test, and at the end it said, sorry, you're not one of our people. You're not the type of people that we need. And that just sent her into a bit of a rage, actually. She sent a very strongly worded email to the boss of that particular company to let them know how that might feel to get that kind of response. But also, they screened her out just through AI. So this isn't a session all about AI, but AI in your recruitment processes is probably causing a problem for neurodivergent people. You may need to think about that if you are using it. Things like measuring eye contact or facial expressions and AI actually doing that interview and making those assessments may very well be discriminatory. I'm just going to leave that there for a moment. So recruitment really does shape workplace inclusivity. And I'm loving this. This is some information from Becca that she's left me because she's not here today. Skills are a tangible thing. But recruitment, it really is not the film Taken. You know, the one with Liam Neeson, where he says, I have a particular set of skills. But sometimes we might want to look at something like the social model of disability to talk about the barriers within recruitment and the barriers that we might not see. That social model of disability will show you things like what's going on in your environment, the attitudes that you have, and your organizational procedures and policies and processes. And it may be very, very much worthwhile having a look through that lens. Now, I've said that a few times now on the call, that if we're going to make improvements around recruitment in particular in our organizations, we might need to look at that from a different lens. Look at it from the point of view of somebody who's dyspraxic or dyslexic and think, oh, have we created some barriers here? Is the application form too long? Do we have rigid interview formats? Have we got inaccessible tests like situational judgment tests? And there are actually there's case law out there that demonstrates that things like situational judgment tests can be discriminatory for somebody who's autistic, who doesn't have that flexible way of thinking. All of those things will exclude capable people because of the design process, not necessarily because of their capability. However, I am somebody who's pragmatic and I do have balance and I'm a boss and I've been a hiring manager. And actually, when we're going through a recruitment process, we are trying to test in a finite period of time whether somebody is going to be a good fit for the role, whether they can do the job. However, it doesn't just stop there. We can do things like we can do work trials. We can do longer interviews. We can do opportunities to come in and find out about the place before you go through the next stages of your process. You just need to make them fair and equitable. So a couple of points about the law, and there is no good inclusive change session if I don't talk about the law and recruitment or the law and neurodiversity. So just to clarify here that candidates and those people making applications for jobs are protected under the Equality Act 2010. And Section 6 will define a disability as a physical or mental impairment that has a substantial and long-term adverse effect on a person's ability to carry out day-to-day activities. That does not mean you have a diagnosis. Nowhere there does it say you have a diagnosis. It actually is about that substantial and long-term adverse effect. So normally neurodiversity will fall under that category. Not everybody who's neurodivergent will meet that criteria because they may not have substantial and long-term adverse effects. And I have two people in my own family, and I meet lots of people that I work with and that I support, that some people will not have substantial long-term and adverse effect on their ability to carry out day-to-day activities, but others will. They will both be autistic, but one person will not experience those challenges and others do. We are not there to make that judgment, but if we believe that there is, and it's reasonably considered that we should have known, we have a duty to do something about it. That duty comes under Section 20 of the Equality Act, that we have a duty to make reasonable adjustments to make sure disabled people are not substantially disadvantaged compared to those who are not disabled. And that applies to both workers and job applicants. Now, can you remember earlier I mentioned my daughter had done a situational judgment test for a supermarket job? And at the beginning of that test, there was a little bit of text that came up that said, we know that some people struggle with these tests. If you'd like it in another format, then give us a call or send us a message and we'll do that. It never said this is a reasonable adjustment. It never said, if you're autistic, you don't need to do this, call us. It said, if you'd like it in another format. That language in itself was not helpful. However, there was the option to do it. What I would say is that if you can be more explicit with that language, that would be more helpful for somebody who needs very clear and explicit language in order to understand what you've asked. Any questions and anything you'd like to share at this point, just let me know. Pop it in the chat. You know I like a bit of interaction. So I'm going to round up now with some top tips, okay? I've got 3 top tips and I've got a bonus. And those of you that were here right at the beginning, you might have had a clue what our bonus is about, okay? So 3 top tips. Let's start with number 1. Provide information and questions in advance. This is a reasonable adjustment, but it's also something we can do for everyone We do it at Inclusive Change. We send all our questions out in advance. Some people who aren't used to this, it will send them into a spin. So we try and give a little bit of preparation that we're going to do that. But doing that for many people can help them prepare. So you can send interview questions before. You can send information about the interview panel and what to expect. You could send photographs of that interview panel. It will help then with processing time. It will reduce anxiety. And you can still have follow-up questions in your interview. Doesn't mean you're not going to ask any other questions, and that would be absolutely out of the remit. You can still follow up. You can still probe. Thanks, Helen. No problem. Follow-up questions are still allowed. An example of this is John Lewis and Waitrose in 2024. They started to send their interview questions out in advance. For us, we try and send as much information as we can, how to get there, who you'll see, what time, what to expect, because that takes all of the anxiety away. I say all, a lot of the anxiety away of the things that we're probably not needing to worry about. So we can just worry about how we perform in that interview. Top tip number 2, adapt communication methods. Okay, we don't all communicate in the same way. We may need alternative formats. Some people may need written prompts or extra time, and that's okay. Can we provide that? And if they request it, why wouldn't we, for a start? But some people will say, well, that's not reasonable because that's not fair to everyone else. Actually, let's go back to that section 20 of the Equality Act. We need to make sure that people aren't substantially disadvantaged compared to non-disabled peers. So compared to non-disabled applicants, and if written prompts and extra time will give them that level playing field and provide equity, then actually that should be considered under a reasonable adjustment. You might want to match and change your communication style to support that candidate to bring out their strengths. And the goal is not necessarily to test somebody under stress. How many jobs do we really want to test somebody under stress? Don't get me wrong, I know there are some. Really, I've done those jobs and I've had to be tested under stress in an interview. Really, really. If I told you I did a 3-week training course and never knew what I was going to do from 1 hour to the next, there was no agenda, because I needed to be tested in that situation to ensure that I can cope with that level of flexibility. Otherwise, it was not going to be the right job for me. But our goal in those situations are to assess ability. And so think about how we can do that and how we may need to think about our communication styles. And the last one, top tip number 3, be specific with your questions or assessments. I mentioned earlier about that situational judgment test where there was a little sentence at the top that said, if you think that you would like this in a different format, we know this doesn't work for everybody. And I'm paraphrasing now. I'm going to get it actually. I'm going to write it down. I'm paraphrasing. But that language was quite vague. That language wasn't explicit. It didn't say, if you need a different format because you are, or if you struggle with this, call us. It was vague. So be specific with your questions and assessments. And quite often you might find that you get an atypical response back. You might find you ask a question and then you'll get a response and you think, that wasn't exactly what I was asking, but actually that fitted. Actually, I can understand where they're coming from. Just because something is atypical, so it's not the norm and it's not what you're expecting, doesn't mean that it's incorrect. You might need to clarify some questions because big questions like, tell me about yourself. Oh my word, where are we going to start? Okay, do you want to know about my childhood? Do you want to know about my school years? Do you want to know about my favorite hobby? Shall I tell you about my pets? That may be the thing that's going through somebody's head. That may be the thing that's going through somebody neurotypical. But usually, if you expect that question of tell me about yourself, you're going to think, I need to direct that to this job, etc. However, if you could change that to tell me about your last job, tell me about your career, we're narrowing it down. We're making it clear that I don't need to know about your pets. I don't need to know about your Auntie Mildred. I need to know about your career, and that's what we're here to talk about. You might want to focus on competencies and real examples, using things like a STAR example, situation, task, action, review, or results, depending which way you go. You may need to look at those kind of things and bring those in. And if you're going to do that, provide instructions to your candidate on how to complete a STAR example or competencies. Explain what that's about to give them that level playing field. Do it for everyone. So last one on there, avoid ambiguous or hypothetical questions. What would happen if, I mean, don't get me wrong, my family love a hypothetical question, but they're not usually ones that we have in job interviews. So those are some top tips. Any questions? I'm going to see a quick question here or a quick one. I'll come back to that. What's an example of a written prompt being yeah, bear with me. I will come back to that one. All right. I may not be able to answer it fully, but I will come back. Bonus tip, and I put a QR code on there. Okay. You might want to find out about access to work. Now, finding out about access to work may be helpful in initial recruitment. So maybe putting some information about access to work on your recruitment packs. If you need additional support, you may be able to get that through Access to Work. Access to Work is a government program. It is funded by the DWP. It is not a great process to go through right now. However, you can get support for a job interview through Access to Work. Now, that might be through British Sign Language. So you might find that you can fund BSL interpreters through that. But there may also be funding for a support worker to help you through a job interview. That said, then, if you're an employer, if you could put this information into your recruitment packs, really helpful. Then, if you put it into your onboarding packs, Access to Work can be a fund that will support people in the workplace. If you are disabled, you can apply to Access to Work, and it is worth a considerable amount of money. Not everybody gets that full amount of money, but based on need, you may very well get support and equipment or even contribution to travel costs in order to thrive in the workplace and achieve your role. If you are employing somebody and they are disabled, getting them to consider and think about applying for Access to Work before they start with you means that their application will be prioritized. That means they can have access to work in place, if not before they come to work for you, then shortly afterwards. Our website has an absolute banging load of information, and I just looked at it before I came online. You can watch a video, there's a free guide, and you can book a call with us to find out more about that one. So that's kind of me finished with my bit. Okay, what I will say at the end here is these changes, we hope, will help neurodivergent people and future applicants. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I will stop the recording in a moment. If you would like any more information, then you can get in touch with us at Inclusive Change. You can also try our recruitment audit. We have a neurodiversity recruitment audit, which is on our web pages. It's completely free. It's 13 questions, unlucky for some, 3 minutes to complete, and you'll get a printout, you'll get a PDF that will say, these are your areas, we give it a RAG status, all of those kind of things. So you can have a look at that as well. Let's go forward to my next slide. I would love to know if you've had any takeaways from today's session. Whilst you're thinking about that, I am going to stop the recording because I'm going to open it up for questions. Unless, there we go, right, Carly's putting some stuff in there. I do have a question. So before I go to stop the recording, I'm going to try and answer that question. All right. But I'd love to know your thoughts about anything as we were going through the session. So before I stop the recording, this question, what's an example of a written prompt being provided? Just asking for clarity. In a scenario-based assessment role, scenario-based assessment role play, can you be provided with the rubric you're being assessed on, as in what the assessors are looking for? I would say yes. I am not a legal expert. I am not, oh, thanks, Emma. I am not a legal expert. I cannot say you cannot, you must. Okay, this would be down to your organization. But what I would be doing is I would be going through a decision making process around reasonable adjustments to say, okay, if I do this, what's the impact? If I don't do it, what's the impact? Am I likely to have discriminated against somebody because I didn't do that? As in, provide the rubric for assessment. I would be saying provide the rubric for everyone so they know what they're being assessed on. They know what they should be bringing out. And in terms of a written prompt, it might be that somebody hasn't processed verbally what you've asked or what's been requested. So can you provide that written prompt either on a screen, type it? Imagine somebody was deaf. You would need to either sign language, lip read, or provide a written prompt. And if you think about somebody who has audio processing disorder, which quite honestly, lots of neurodivergent people may do, you may want to consider how you could provide that prompt, and it may be in a written format. So you could have prompts printed and provide them if you're in person, or you may provide those prompts by writing on a screen or putting it into the chat so that somebody's got an opportunity to process verbally and visually or through the written prompt. I hope that helps in terms of that answer. Again, sometimes I get asked the questions and I'm like, do I know that? I'm not sure. But I'm working that through in my head. I am not an employment lawyer. I am not a HR trained professional in terms of CIPD, but I do work through decisions and think of it in the way of, okay, what can I do? What can't I do? What policies and procedures do we have? And it may be that you might need to think about looking at your current policies and procedures around recruitment and assessment. And do you want to make a decision about actually, yes, we're going to send that rubric out, or yes, we're going to be able to provide those prompts in a workspace. It does help, by the way, to know that you need to provide those adjustments and that you're not going to have them just in case because somebody didn't tell you and then they turn up and they say, oh, but I needed prompts. Actually, there is a bit of an onus for somebody to say, I need support. This is what would help me. But sometimes they don't know what will help them. So sometimes it can be helpful to say, these are the ways in which we can provide reasonable adjustments in your process. Please let us know if these would help you. And then you can make that preparation. Any other questions? And let me stop the recording.